Welcome to Desire Dilemma, a podcast that amplifies immigrant voices in America. I'm Funmi Apantaku-Onayemi, your host. It is surprising that 56,000 immigrants left the islands of the Bahamas, a paradise with beautiful beaches, palm trees, to reside in the U.S. Although most immigrants left their countries of origin, their culture, and everything familiar to them to come to America, Bahamians are different. Bahamians who have stayed in the U.S. have maintained their culture and are ranked the most educated West Indian Americans. The islands of the Bahamas is only 50 miles from the U.S. mainland. Bahamians have come to partake in the abundance of the U.S. and better their lives. Like many immigrants, they experience challenges that can affect their physical, mental, and social well-being. On Desire Dilemma podcast, we will share a conversation with Karon Dedolchow about her coming to America and the challenges she had encountered since she's been here. Our podcast advisor, Dr. Risa Jones, will render guidance on how immigrants can adapt to the norms of America for their own psychological wellness. Hello. How are you, Dr. Jones?
Hello, great. How are you today?
How are you, Karon?
Hi, I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I just wonder, when we consider the Bahamas a paradise, how was your childhood?
My childhood was very normal, I would say. I grew up with 4 older sisters, and we all went into the same grade schools together. I had my grandparents around that monitored everything we did and everywhere we went. My dad was a golfer, and so he was very busy, and my mom was in the hotel industry. And it was a very busy type of family. But it was nice, cohesion, coherent. We had lots to do. We played lots of games. And, it was just a nice family, all sisters at one point. And then 10 years later, a boy came along. And so we were always close, and we're still close today.
So describe the country.
The country is, in my mind's eye, small. When I think of the country, I think of it as small. It's beautiful waters. I love the beach. The people are friendly. The families, everyone's related to everyone. So you can go anywhere, and you're my cousin. We find out that we have a lot of relatives together in the same family. The country, the different islands. Everyone came from an island. Basically, their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents originated from an island. There would be times where you would go and visit those islands with your parents, and, you would have chores, and they would, keep you on the heavy manners. And the island in itself is very, very flat. And Nassau in particular is it's sort of small to me, but it's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful country.
So for America to consider Bahamians ranked most educated West Indians in America, how would you describe your schools?
The schools are British influenced. We don't call it elementary school. We call it primary school. They all wear uniforms. Every school wear a uniform to identify where the children are coming from. The education is very strict. It's very broad. And it's really no child left behind. I remember my elementary school teacher up to today. And my uniform was navy blue skirt and a white top. I remember being in classrooms and really literally learning. And then they have the different educational levels, BJCs, that prepares you for college. And we have some students that graduate at the age of 14 and 15. And I believe because of the British influence and, of course, the diligence of the teachers, that makes that possible.
Yeah, when you talked about your uniform being blue, mine was gray and white. Good time, though. I actually remember that very much, and I love it. So, knowing what you just said and just hearing you describe the country as beautiful, the people great, and very much relatives all around, did you have an image of America while you were there? that was better than being in the Bahamas?
No, I don't recall having an image of America. We traveled often. I guess because I came at 16 and so young that, those memories may have diminished. But wait, let me backtrack. Yes and no. I had an image of living in Chicago from the age of 14, only because I was a dancer and the choreographer came from Chicago and she brought her girls to Nassau, Bahamas to meet her group of local girls. And they performed for us and it was a wonderful event. In the next summer, I was supposed to go to Chicago with the group of girls and I didn't go. So I didn't have a vision of what Chicago looked like, but I did know that one day I would go to Chicago and live because that dream of going and visiting and dancing with the girls never came to pass. So no vision per se, but a plan in my heart that I knew one day I was going to go and live in Chicago. Now I went to Chicago via Miami. So at 16, I had no idea of what America looked like.
My idea was John Travolta dancing, Saturday Night Live. You remember? That was my image of America. And that was what I had in mind when I came, actually. But of course, I did not stop in New York. I came also to Chicago.
Okay.
So your very first day in America, how was it?
When I came over in June, I remember my first day. I came to visit my aunt, who I ended up staying with. She owned a corner store. She would have to get up at 4 a.m. And so I would have to go with her because she couldn't leave me home alone. I was the only child in the house. And I remember waking up and driving to her store in the dark, she's opening all the locks on this door. And then I would go in the back on a single pull-out bed and sleep until I guess the sun came up over when I was ready. And I remember opening the curtains to the store and being very shy and very withdrawn and very quiet. And I remember that very clearly. That was my first day. And I still have the feelings from it as well. The feeling was just, oh, what do I do now? Kind of, yeah.
So you felt lost or something?
That's a very good way to describe it. Yes. I think I felt lost.
Were you surprised by anything?
Not that I can recall. No.
Were you disappointed?
No, I wasn't disappointed.
Were you impressed by anything?
I would say yes, because she had a store. She ran a store, pickles in the jar and different sorts of foods and the way they spoke and the way they communicated with each other and those sorts of things surprised me because, of course, I know how Americans speak, but to be in it and to witness it was really surprising.
In a good way or bad way?
It was a good way. It was a good way. It was always a giggle for me. It was always like, okay, That's how I felt back then. I wasn't intimidated. I didn't feel like anything bad was going to happen to me. It was a good feeling, a good, happy feeling, but lost feeling. I was, like they say, fresh off the boat.
So let's go then on to high school. 16, you at that high school age. How was high school for you?
I left in high school at 16, and when I found out that I was going to stay and live in Miami, I had to go through the immigrant process. I had to register myself. Because they, any school age students have to be in school. It's just mandatory no matter where you're from, right? So I remember trenching in the dark, in the rain, going down to immigration way south in Miami, filling out my paperwork so I can become a student. Then they bust kids out of Miami, Liberty City into Hialeah. So I had to be on the bus stop at 5:30 in the morning, in the dark, by myself, only a few blocks away from home, but driving on the bus all the way in Hialeah, in the dark. I graduated from Hialeah Senior High School. It was a great experience. I was the pom-pom girl, the only one of color out of 22 girls. I was smack dead in the middle. I was doing my thing. I had 3 years of Spanish, so I was able to communicate in Spanish, read, write Spanish. It was a phenomenal experience. As I got used to it and had to stay behind in school to do practices or whatever, I learned to catch the bus. But it was a very nice experience. You have the football players, and then you have the basketball players, and it was a nice experience. It was a very nice experience.
Yeah, a lot of people have described high school in America to be a little violent and rough. Did you experience any of that?
Yes, yes. I watched girls put up dukes and fight. Yeah, it was terrifying. I just sat on the bus and say, wow, how could they fight? I don't know what it was about. These were neighborhood kids that came from my neighborhood. These were the Black kids that were coming on the bus.
Wow.
Not against each other. Yeah. And so it would, sometimes be very rowdy. And I was also attacked at one point on the bus for no reason. The guy just came up and hit me in the back of my neck with a book. It was like, what is that all about? But I was quiet. But yeah, there was violence definitely on the bus ride there and back. And, the girls would go into the bathrooms and smoke, and I would exit very quickly. I met my best friend, who is my daughter's godchild to today, on the bus stop. And she was another Bahamian.
Oh, beautiful.
So we team tagged, and we hung out and we stuck together. And that was the greatest thing. So, we were there for each other. So we weren't alone.
So looking back, what challenged you in those early years?
I can't specifically think of a challenge at all. Of course, learning how to get around. I found that period challenging because I didn't have big sisters around at the time, although eventually one did come over. So I didn't have my siblings with me. And so it was almost like a loner period, a lonely period where I didn't get the opportunity to have my three older sisters around to continue to spoil me, per se. Because they've always been and still are very overprotective. So I'm like, I was alone. And now that I think back on that, I would consider that a challenge because everything was done over the phone.
But looking back generally all through the years, when was your lowest point in America?
So I came over as a student. I graduated with my associate's degree, went home for 1 year. I felt closed in. I felt small. To be on a rock, it was like being on a rock. The water can just roll over at any point. So I had that fear in mind. After that, I went to Chicago as a student. Then I was on an ambassador status visa. And then I found myself here living and working in America without a status that allowed me to work here in America. Because I quit my job and then went home. That didn't work out. And I wanted to come back. And so I came back. Now I had a social security card from high school, driver's license from high school, so I was always able to renew those. But when I was no longer employed with the Bahamas tourist office, that's when it got really scary because I did not want to go home. I had no desire to go home. So I just used my documents knowing that, I should not have been using those documents, but I survived. It got to the point where, okay, now I want to move out of Chicago. So I tried Atlanta. I didn't like Atlanta. And, all knowing that the only way I can stay here and live here legally is by applying through a lottery or getting married. And so I remember being very sad when I moved to West Palm Beach because I didn't want to go home, but I don't have a status. And, I can work, but I'm not here. I'm not doing this legally. And it was very dark and concerning. And it was scary, actually, because, some political reports would come on, saying that, they're going to pick up the immigrants and you can't get caught, driving, or you're going to be deported. And those were very, very dark times for me. It was so scary for me. So, you hear about people marrying relatives and you hear about people, paying $10,000 or thousands of dollars to marry someone so that they can stay here. Well, as a very strong Christian, I didn't want to do anything of that sort because I wanted to get married one day, hopefully, and have children. But God blessed me with a wonderful man. We were friends for 5 months and there was a lot of potential. So I said, maybe I will marry this man for my green card.
Okay.
Maybe this will work. He has his own house, he likes me. And 28 years later, I'm still with the same man.
No, 28 years later, you're still saying,
I'm still, yeah. So the joke in the family is
You're still sending home, but in a happy way, right?
yeah. The joke in the family is I married your dad to get my citizenship, so I don't know. And he tells me the joke's on me, so.
Well,
Yeah.
thank God for that story, huh? That was a beautiful
Yeah.
one. So it's quite interesting that you said you didn't want to go back. You know, no one would think of the Bahamas as a country in which no one wants to go back to. But of course, I'm assuming that you now found much more to do in America. So are you then saying that point when you married then changed the direction of your life?
Yes, absolutely. Totally. Because I didn't have to go back home. So it was a done deal. It was a done deal. If I had returned home, I don't think my life would have been the same.
Despite the fact that you've been here and you are comfortable, happy with children, you must miss something about your country. What do you miss?
I don't miss anything.
Oh my, wrong question, huh?
No, I don't feel guilty.
Okay.
And I don't feel bad. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I came here at 16. This is all I know. I can't miss something that I don't know. I enjoy going home. I enjoy my family. But when it's time to come back to America, I'm going back home. And that's just the raw fact. Whenever I visited 3-4 days here and there, always saw my parents, my family. But this is home for me.
What do you think about the influence of the American culture on your adult children?
Our kids are very well cultured. They visited the Bahamas in the summertime. They hated it as kids, but they literally call themselves Bahamians. But so in the American culture, it is what it is. They are Americans. They don't know any other lifestyle. So the balance between them knowing no other lifestyle, being married to an American, and me being the island person is where the challenge comes in, because I know the way we were raised and our morals and, how you treat your family and how you treat your parents and how you speak to people. It's different. So it's more difficult for me to translate that to them, that I'm from this culture and this is how it's going to be. They're Americans and they're Americans, but they've been exposed. They know it, but the American culture is more dominating in their life, of course.
Who has been the most influential American in your life?
Well, going back to Chicago, I had a very rocky landing in Chicago. And I know that there was a lady that knew that, I was struggling with having somewhere to stay. And she took me in with her 2 daughters. And I often think of that as very, it's a hard thing for me. Coming, although I'm Bahamian, traveling to Chicago, I was alone. I was by myself. I made that decision. My mom, my parents agreed with me that I would go there, but I'm still a Bahamian. I'm still an island girl in my heart.
So what would you tell new or incoming immigrants about the America of today?
I'll tell them it's not as easy as it looks on TV.
Yes.
You have to work hard. You have to work very hard. Milk and honey is not flowing on the streets. And it is the land of the free and the home of the brave. You have to be very, very brave to live here. And, you can do it. You can do it, but you have to be, diligent about it. You have to be intentional about it. You have to, because there's so many different directions one can go in, and it's so many choices that you can make, that you have to really be able to focus on what you really want to do, and go after it and stick with it, because it's just so broad and so big and so many opportunities. So that's what I would, say to a new immigrant, that, go after your dream, be intentional, learn the culture, stay under the radar, sort of thing. It's definitely doable.
Well, Dr. Jones.
Yes, I've been enjoying your shared experience. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I so appreciate it. I love hearing your memories of paradise of your country and how beautiful it is, and the schools and the culture. And at this point, I love to interact with our guests to understand what we can maybe extract from your experiences, like Dr. Funmi Apantaku-Onayemi was doing in terms of looking at your experiences and giving advice to others. So one of the things that you mentioned, I think is a very common experience for many immigrants is those times when a mistake is made or movement has happened or papers have expired. And, you mentioned that as a dark time in your own experience. I'm wondering if you can share some of what your mindset was during that time, either through that or another experience you mentioned was when you had a precarious living situation, when you had to depend on somebody else to welcome you into their home. What was your mindset, and what would you suggest for others who may be going through those ups and downs periods as they try to move and maybe seek legal counsel or whatever in order to improve their status?
I understand the urgency of wanting to be in the country legally, wanting to work, wanting to make a decent life. The only thing without failure is to trust God. You just have to trust God.
And so you find that your faith was important to you as you moved through these societal ups and downs?
Absolutely. I remember writing God a letter, because I used to write God letters, almost every night, dear God, and just write love letters to God. And those are one of my prayers said, I do not want to do this, thing illegally. I want to do it the right way. I want to be obedient to you. And he blessed me with a very good husband. So I would say that my faith played a big part in going through life in America.
And when you say stay under the radar, how is that both a good thing to pursue and maybe a hindrance?
Yeah, when I say under the radar, don't get in trouble. Don't get in trouble with the law. Stay under the radar. Be a good citizen of the country. Do good things. Do nice things. Don't become a rebel. Don't think that you can't be deported. Don't take things for granted, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you were mentioning earlier on in the interview about even feeling lost. What have become your anchors? Like you came from a culture that had a multi-generational perspective where, as you mentioned, grandparents were around, generations were around. We don't see that as much in the American culture. So what have become your anchors, and what would you suggest to other immigrants who might be missing traditional or cultural anchors to pursue and look for in trying to find anchors in America?
Find good friends. Friends come and friends go, but find good friends. Get with a family that embraces you. And because my anchor in Chicago was the first girl I met in Chicago, and she's still my best friend today. Her family brought me in as one of their own, and there were 5 girls and 1 boy. I would spend every holiday with them, cookouts. Find a family that you can gel with and you can blend with, who you can feel a part of. That's a very good anchor. That was a very good anchor for me, because there were many times I didn't go home. And so that's what I think that if you don't know anyone here, get into a family. The same thing happened to me when I first came over and met my friend on the bus stop. Her family became my anchor. We went to church together. I spent every weekend with them together, and her mom, brought me into the home, and I became one of them, cleaning, cooking, and doing the yard work just alongside them. So find a family. I think a family that, have open arms towards you it'll keep you grounded.
Great. And the last thing I would love to take from your experience in giving advice to others is you mentioned independence as being important to you, whether it was learning how to get around or gaining your independence in other ways. Why was that so important to you? And what would you offer as advice to new immigrants who are coming here and maybe wanting to seek independence, at what needs to happen, maybe physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, in order to move towards that?
You cannot be afraid. You cannot be afraid. You must venture out. You have to learn to bust the system if you have to. You cannot be afraid of the world because it's really just more of a mind game. You have to have a strong mind. You have to have a strong will. You have to be determined to live here if this is what your heart desire. Just make it work for you. Get up, do the right thing, ask questions. Don't be afraid to not know, because at a young age, at my middle 20s, I was on the subway in Chicago, and I was on the bus stop by myself, sometimes in the dark. You have to just know that everything's going to be okay. Just, everything's going to be fine.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that advice around intentionality and focus when you're making your choices, and not being afraid, and finding those anchors, whether that's family or friends or co-workers or faith, and keeping that constant as a part of your experience. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. And of course, thank you so much, Karon, for sharing with us. Oh, what's America? Huh? We thank God for being here. We thank God for how far we've come.
Absolutely.
To our audience, thank you all for listening to our podcast on immigrants' desires to come to America and their dilemmas in staying in America. We hope that this information has been helpful and informative. Join us again next Friday as we bring you our next episode of Desire Dilemma, a podcast that amplifies immigrant voices in America. Please like, share, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube. Feel free to contact us on desire.dilemma@gmail.com. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.